Welcome back to The Right Stuff. I'm Veronique Mandel. Well, if you're a writer and you want other people to read what you hope are your brilliant words, one of the most important people in your life will be a kindly publisher who thinks your words are brilliant. I have one of those very important publishers with me now. Amy Dunn is the publisher at Palimpsest Press in Windsor. And I want to say welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, what does Palimpsest mean?
Yeah, I didn't actually come up with the name. The former owner came up with the name.
Yeah. How many authors do you have?
Overall, we put out 6 books per year right now.
Right.
We've published approximately 34 poetry titles. We had some children's titles that we no longer publish children's titles, but we had about 4 or 5 authors who were also children's authors as well.
That's terrific. Now, I've often wondered, how does one decide to become a publisher?
To be honest, I purchased the company 2 years ago. I sort of fell into it. I actually went back to school and was taking the publishing certificate from Ryerson, which is an amazing program for anybody who's interested. And in one of my classes, I had to interview a publisher, so I contacted the former owner, Dawn Cresson, to do an interview, and when I went to speak with her, she was looking for a buyer. So it was kismet, actually. We just, the more we talked about it, the more I had wanted to get into. I was more of an editor rather than a publisher, so it's been a little bit of a learning curve, but it's a really enjoyable experience.
How much different would you say it is now being a publisher than maybe 25 or 30 years ago? Is it very much different? Is it more competitive?
I wouldn't say it's more competitive. I would actually say it's almost, there's a trend back towards the independent publisher right now. It became all about the major publishing houses, and people weren't getting published. Mm-hmm. So it was harder and harder to get published. And then others started opening smaller publishing houses. And that's really the source of CanLit today, is the smaller publishing houses, because we're willing to take chances on authors that the larger houses overlook sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think that's such good news, because there was such a lamenting in this country when so many independent publishers were going, the way of the dodo.
Yep.
And
that's really changed. Independent publishers are coming back. We're getting a lot of support from the government. We're also getting a lot of support from each other. It's not as competitive as one might think. Yeah. I belong to the Literary Press Group of Canada, which is a cooperative of publishers, and there's mentorship programs. So if I wanted to work with another publisher to learn stuff, they're more than helpful. There's more than enough authors to go around, because there's an amazing pool of talent in Canada to choose from.
And so the advantages, disadvantages of a smaller publisher over, holding out for the big one that may never come.
The issue with the larger publishing houses is basically that you have to already be published. You already have to be a very big name. So the independent publisher is giving people a step in, a leg in, to get published, and that's how you're going to get noticed by the bigger publishing houses, where you're going to possibly make some money. But for us, it's more about discovering new talent, fostering that talent, really, working with the authors, which the larger publishing houses don't do as much anymore.
I'm sure that this is music to the ears of so many talented writers listening to our show, because that's often the biggest complaint that you hear from writers. There's nowhere for us to go. I mean, unless you're lucky and you hit it really big with a certain shade of gray. Yeah. So it's really great to have sort of this line of opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. For example, we just published our first fiction novel, and she was a poet, nonfiction writer who was looking to cross over, and she brought me a manuscript that was fairly rough shape. And I said to her, it's going to be a lot of work, but if you're willing, let's work on that. And she did. We put in the time, we put in the effort, which you don't get that from larger houses necessarily. And the book has been selling really well. We got noticed by Harper's Bazaar, mariashriver.com.
Congratulations.
We were in the Globe and Mail. It's pretty, you get a chance to actually work on the writing, as opposed to just putting it out there. You get somebody who's willing to give you feedback, who's willing to work with you to make it an amazing book.
It's really great to hear about local publishers starting to get noticed outside of the area. I just love it.
Biblioasis has
absolutely
had, books on the Giller,
Yeah.
and that's amazing. Our own books, we've had authors. Recently, one of our poets was shortlisted for the Relit Award. One of our poets won the Lansdowne Prize for Poetry, which is a Winnipeg prize. And our poets and our authors, they're getting out there and they're actually receiving attention. And that's pretty rare for smaller publishing houses.
No, that's fantastic. What about distribution and marketing? Is that sort of difficult? I know that there was a time when smaller publishing houses began to have difficulties with distribution because some of the bigger houses were conglomerating.
Distribution is a really key element in getting the books out across the country. And for example, I belong to the Literary Press Group, and like I said, it's an organization that you join that allows you to be part of something bigger. So even though you're a very small house, they provide you with distribution, sales representation, mentoring, all these things that you really need in order to get those books out across Canada, not just locally.
Now, can publishing houses afford to send authors on tours and things like that, or do you have to be a really important author?
No, my authors go on tour, absolutely. Obviously, not major Canada-wide ones, but I've had authors sent to pretty much everywhere across Canada. For example, Dorothy will be going out west in the fall. She'll be also touring in Toronto and London. I have poets from across Canada, and we send our poets in Victoria, we send to Toronto. So there's a small budget for touring, but absolutely. Yep.
That's fantastic. We've been talking a lot about your business, but tell us a little bit about you. That you grew up here in this area?
Yes, I grew up out in McGregor, which is a very tiny, small town in the center of Essex County, and went to the University of Windsor, and I've been in Windsor my whole life until and then I started taking that course from Ryerson, which is what led me to this.
Did you ever in your wildest dreams ever think of yourself one day owning a publishing house?
Not owning a publishing house per se. I actually wanted to be a writer, and then discovered that I was a very slow writer, and when it takes you 10 years to write a book, that's too long. And then I realized I wasn't really a writer, I was an editor. And once I discovered that, then that's why I took the course at Ryerson. And like I said, one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I owned a publishing company.
Do you recommend, I know many writers find it difficult to make a decision about whether or not they should get an agent, or whether they should try and get a publisher. And I know it's very difficult often to get to a publisher without an agent.
I think that if you can get an agent, that's wonderful. For the average Canadian author, the route to go is getting published in literary journals and magazines. Once you have, for example, we'll publish new debut authors, but they have to be published in literary journals and magazines. We need to see evidence that you're out there, that you're published. When I see that on a CV, I'm probably, that's an incentive for me. That's something that I can use to market you. So if you can, again, really key is get published in literary journals, in magazines. That will help you approach the agents and the publishers. You can do that simultaneously, it's not a problem. As of yet, I haven't dealt with an agent, but I would if an agent came to me with something, I would probably take a look at it.
And I'm sure a lot of writers are thinking, well, come on, get on, ask her all those other questions I want to know. So what is the process for someone to get to a publisher like you?
If you're submitting to me, we have a submission period, January to March. You can send your stuff in during that period. If you send it outside of that period, chances are we're not going to look at it. We don't have time. We have a very set time. You can send your stuff in, but mainly I would say go to poetry readings. Get out, do some readings. Go to open mics, and we solicit a lot of poets, and that's usually, especially debut poets and debut writers, we find them at poetry readings, reading at open mics, things of that nature.
How long would it take from the time a writer sends you a manuscript before they would expect to hear back? What's that time frame?
Ideally, it's 6 months. It can take up to 2 years. It just depends on how many manuscripts we have and how long it takes us to go through them. But usually you can tell fairly quickly within a page or two if it's really good writing, and that's the book you're going to read first, because you can already tell that it's really good.
In journalism, they always say the lead's the thing.
Yeah.
And so the opening paragraphs of anything, I guess,
Yep.
Are what you look for.
Yeah, we usually will scan the book, but usually if there's something that catches you right on the first page, you're going to look deeper into the book. So always make sure your first poem or your first page is fantastic.
Well, this has been terrifically informative, but I'm sure that your website will give writers all the details they need.
Yep. Everything you need to know about submitting to us is on the website. Absolutely.
That's terrific. Very quickly, do you have stuff in the pipeline right now that's going to be coming out?
Yep, we have 3 poetry collections being released this March. Dorothy Mahoney's is being released on World Puppy Day, her book of dog poems.
What a great thing!
Yes. We also have a fiction title coming out this fall, and we're also launching a nonfiction. We do literary nonfiction. M. Travis Lane, who's an iconic Canadian author, she's releasing her book of reviews with us.
That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you coming and joining us and letting us know about all sort of the wonderful publishing opportunities anymore from small publishers like yourself.
Oh, thank you.
It's fantastic. Well, so there you have it. A poet and the publisher who makes sure her work gets out to the readers, you. Please go to Palimpsest Press, to their website, and check out other authors they have in their lineup. Thank you for being with me. I do really enjoy your company. Now, if you're a writer anywhere in the country who has an attachment to Windsor and Essex and Kent counties, please email me, Veronique@therightstuff.tv, and check out our website, because if you go to the website, you will be able to see all of our past shows. Join us again, won't you? And to all you writers, remember, never a day without a word. I'm Veronique Mandel. Bye for now.